All right, I've turned this up. So yeah, he played without them. Now, who else does that have the rest of BRHS's schedule?
They play Pell City next week.
Or they're not?
They don't have anybody.
2 minutes.
Chilton County, Valley.
Shoot.
Valley will be kind of tough. Stanhope.
Valley's not going to be tough. Stanhope's not good. They got beat too.
I'm just telling you who's on the schedule. We can only play. Is this?
Yeah, I know you can only play who's in your region and all that stuff. I get you. But
this makes my Big Ten argument even better. Hey,
why does it make it better? Because BRHS is.
Yeah, man. I'm sorry that.
What is your argument?
That
you play who's in front of you?
You play who's in front of you. And if you're the superior team, you should display that. But on that level, it's hard for any competitive team or whatever to stay up that much for every single game. So they could have a drop off at one point. I mean,
well, what about that? So then you would have been for Boise State making it in some of these championship games.
I get the sentiment, but they weren't the 2 top teams in the country. See, this with the playoff, I think Ohio State could lose 2 games, and they're not going to. But I'm saying they could lose 2 games. I still think they're the best team in the country.
Well, but I mean, by that argument, the 2010 Alabama team that was 10-3 with probably the most NFL talent.
Yeah, but they weren't the best. I don't know if they were the best team. I guess I don't know.
He said we had 2 minutes about a minute ago.
You got 30 seconds, man.
30 seconds. He sounds like I feel. I can tell you that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fading in and out a little bit. Hello?
You are fading in and out. Why are you doing that? Now talk.
Test 1, test 2, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
It's like it's slipping away from the.
Am I too loud?
Now, we're talking sports. It's time for the Saturday Sports Countdown with Brett Pritchard, Randy Lee, and Luke Robinson.
All right, when JJ gets done, it's all yours. You'll go up automatically.
All right, buddy.
Edgewood beat somebody else.
Countdown. To be a part of the program, call 256-234-6221. Now, let's join Brett, Randy, and Luke for the Saturday Sports Countdown.
Hey, everybody, and welcome into the Saturday Sports Countdown. Luke Robinson, along with a very sleepy Scott Hardy here at JR Sports Bar and Grill. It's pretty lonely here at JR's right now. We're not open, but we are still going to do the show here from JR Sports Bar and Grill. We got Justin Clayton out in the audience. I want to welcome Justin Clayton for being here. Thank you, brother. Gives us some moral support. And I'll tell you, somebody needed some moral support yesterday in just a second, Scott. But want to say, first of all, we're going to get into all the football talk you could possibly want. Lots of high school stuff. Benjamin Russell, big win. Dadeville, nice turnaround win. Central Clay County, they get shut out last night by Leeds. We'll talk about all that. Horseshoe Bend, they look like they were going to maybe eke one out, and they end up falling to Lafayette late. But I got to start the show with this. I know there's college football everywhere, Alabama and Auburn playing and all these things, but got to talk about Serena Williams being upset by Roberta Vinci yesterday. And it's not very often at the beginning of football season or any time during football season that I'll be driving in my car frantically searching for any medium that I can find a U.S. Open women's tennis match in the semifinals. But I found it. I listened to it in my car, headed to Birmingham yesterday, and it was pretty incredible, Scott. I don't know how much you got to see or hear of Serena Williams versus Roberta Vinci, but it was really an incredible thing for me to hear and a huge moment in tennis.
Yeah, and again, coming into the match, obviously everybody knowing the situation surrounding her, going for the Serena Slam, her second one in about 6 or 7 years. So obviously she is the most dominant player in tennis right now, male or female, I think. However, coming in, people were saying that if she lost this match, it would be the biggest upset in tennis history. Now, I don't know to that extent. I'm not that knowledgeable on the history of tennis, but for what she was going through, and if you look at the betting odds before before U.S. Open started. Vinci was not even listed, and her
She was
opponent
300-1.
She was 300-1. Okay, so I mean that lets you know what she was going into. But again, Serena just didn't put it together, and there's been a lot of talk about blaming Drake now for the loss now. But I don't know.
You think Meek Mill was on Roberta Vinci's side and just going, yeah?
Hold on, time out. You get major props for even knowing who Meek Mill was at the time. So I'll let that. I'll give you all the kind of props. But going to Serena again, that would have been obviously it's good for the sport of tennis. I think it hurts the sport of tennis more by her not winning it, because then people nobody's watching it. I mean, I hate to say it. Now you have your pure diehard tennis fans who are going to watch it regardless, but that'd be like Tiger getting cut back in the day. Not so much now, but now they're losing a major portion of their audience the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I totally agree with what you said there, because tennis is one of those sports that had tons of popularity. And I remember back in maybe 87, 88, that Sports Illustrated actually had a cover that said, "Is tennis dead?" Because it was losing popularity even back then. It got to some really low points. Everybody that is very, very good appears to be from a European country that maybe you need a country anymore sometimes. And so it's hard for the U.S. to embrace it the way we once did. There's no John McEnroe's. There's not even any Andre Agassi's. So when you have somebody like a Serena Williams, even though she's climbing up the ladder in age, she's still been pretty dominant. And she really wasn't going for a Serena Slam. She was going for a Grand Slam, all the Grand Slams in a calendar year, which hadn't been done since I think Steffi Graf did it several years ago. And so this was a huge, huge moment for tennis to capture back some spotlight. And now you're going to have a final, and I don't even know who's playing on the other side because I completely lost interest after Serena lost. But you've got this Roberta Vinci woman and somebody else, and I can promise you there is not 1 minute of that match I want to watch. And I play tennis. I like tennis. It's fun. But I just don't want to see it. Some sports need a superstar or two, and tennis needs Serena Williams badly. On the men's side, I know you got Federer and Djokovic. They're going to play for the title on the men's side. I could watch that. I could watch a little bit of it, except for the fact that I believe it's going to be played on Sunday, and the NFL is going to be on, so I'm not going to watch it. But you think about some of the other sports, like soccer needs somebody like that right now in America. The NFL can get away with parity. College football can get away with parity. But if you're a sport and you're trying to capture the imagination of a country again, you need somebody to be the superstar that you can wrap your hands around, or that you want to wrap your hands around their throat. I mean, you either need to love them or you need to hate them. And that's Serena is that way. And I think that was so neat to watch the dynamic with Drake there yesterday. For those who are listening that don't happen to know who Drake is, he's a pretty big artist right now, maybe the biggest artist in the music industry, would you say, in the top 3 or 4 at least?
Top 3, probably. And Taylor, or him and Taylor.
So he's there. He's rumored, I don't know that it's necessarily even confirmed that he's dating Serena Williams, but he's rumored to be dating Serena Williams. Why else would he be there? So he was there, and the camera showed him as much as it showed the match. And he was getting nervous and anxious, and you could tell it. And it was a really wild scene. And now you're going to have Roberta Vinci playing somebody, and Drake ain't going to be there. I'm pretty sure Ice Cube won't be there. I'm positive that Tim McGraw won't be there. I mean, there's nobody that's going to be there of any interest. I can't imagine if you had free tickets to that, would you go to it on a NFL Sunday?
I just can't see it happening. Again, the men's side is somewhat enticing. Those are your 2 top tennis players in the world on the men's side. But again, this would have been a monumental moment for sports, or excuse me, for the sport of tennis. And again, Serena is the most popular player in the sport. Maybe not most popular, but most polarizing, as you said. So again, Vinci talked about it after they had her post-game. Rinaldi had her post-game conference, and she basically was somewhat apologizing. She was like, "I'm sorry to America." They were, why are you sorry? I said, well, somewhat sorry to Serena. I know that upsets the Americans because now they won't have it. But again, this is my day. So again, I think this had more to do with about getting the attention of Americans for this short period of time, because following the French Open, I think once that started to happen, more people got interested in it to see what she'd be able to do. But kind of a disappointing end to what was a stellar season for her.
Well, and it goes back to what I always say about the college basketball tournament. When the NCAA tournament rolls around, everybody's, ooh, I'm for this Cinderella. You're really not. You're for that Cinderella to get really close, and then you want the favorite to win. Because in the end, Do you really want to see George Mason in the Final Four? I don't. I want to see the really good, powerful, big names. I want to see Serena Williams in that final playing somebody. Now, if Roberta Vinci and Serena had been playing in that final match, if that had been the finals and Vinci wins, I might even be able to stomach it a little bit more. But I'm not even a Serena fan necessarily. I'm not a Serena detractor. But for her to lose in the semifinals means this is what that tournament will be known for. It's the finals. Nobody's even going to remember who wins that thing. Everybody's going to remember this is the time that Serena was beaten in the semifinals when she could have won the Grand Slam of tennis in a calendar year. And that's a big deal. We won't get into any more tennis talk, but honestly, when something like that happens in the world of sports, I think you've got to take at least 5 minutes out and talk about it for just a second. Let's jump into high school football, or really let's go into what's on tap for the rest of the show, because we'll go to a break here in a second. But the Wildcats get a big win yesterday. Scott, of course, you do the sideline reporting, do a fantastic job there at the Sportplex last night. Things got a little chippy last night, and they got chippy with the wrong person, if you ask me. I have seen Daniel Bland, and he is a rather large human being who appears to be incredibly tough. I would pick out a lot of other people if I were a high school football player that I might want to scuffle with before I got to Daniel Bland. And apparently one of the Eufaula players decided to try their luck. Fortunately, tempers didn't escalate. He was ejected. It sounds like this kid, according to the broadcast, that he was itching to be tossed out, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. Dadeville with a big win. Nice comeback win for them to beat Childersburg 60-13. Clay Central, they get shut out, as I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, 23-0 by Leeds. I'm not so sure that I would glean a lot from that, either from the Leeds side or the Clay Central side. I don't think it means all is lost for Clay Central necessarily, and I don't think it means Leeds is back necessarily either, because we had a reporter on the scoreboard show last night that went on and on about that game. But there's some Horseshoe Bend got beaten last night. Tallahassee beat Shelby County last night. So we'll talk about all the local scores, and we'll definitely get into the Auburn-Jacksonville State game. I know there are a lot of people out there probably headed towards that ball game right now. Let's go ahead and take our first break, Scott. When we get back, I want to hear your thoughts on the BRHS game, because I know you had a fantastic viewpoint for that contest. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Saturday Sports Countdown.
The opening segment of Sports Blitz is brought to you by Home Place Mortgage of Auburn and Lake Martin, the region's best mortgage professionals and rates for all new or refinancing mortgage services. Come to the right place. Home Place Mortgage of Auburn and Lake Martin. Visit homeplacemtg.com. Are tires and car repairs sexy? No.
15 seconds.
You were in. Heads on this.
Field on Highway 280 in Alec City. Satterfield is the Lake Martin area's Big Green Egg and Accessories headquarters.
Welcome back to the Saturday Sports Countdown. Luke Robinson along with Scott Hardy here at JR Sports Bar and Grill on Alabama Street. JR Sports Bar and Grill, the place to go in Alexander City if you want lunch or if you want dinner. Not necessarily if you want breakfast, but if you want to come and just look through the window and see what Scotty and I are doing. And Justin Clayton's in here. We got a one-man audience. We're all good right now. Want to thank you for listening as you're probably on your way to the Auburn game right now or just rolling out of bed, getting ready to go to the Auburn game. But, Scott, let's use this segment to talk some high school football. The BRHS Wildcats, they absolutely dominate Eufaula last night. And, look, this is kind of a non-rivalry rival because BRHS has handed it to Eufaula the last couple of years, hasn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been a lopsided affair the last couple of years. This rivalry really goes back to when Benjamin Russell was in 5A and they were in the same region, and kind of the season that brought Benjamin Russell back to, I guess, somewhat prominence. They win the region that year on a last-second play by Brian Horn, and that kind of brought the momentum back around the program. So from that perspective, that's why we kind of consider them a rival. But the last couple of seasons, last season, I think they scored 49 on them or 56, something like that, and 35 in the first quarter.
Right.
And they could have easily done the same thing this game, I think, but they tried to do some things offensively that they want to work on. So they were kind of a test game, which is something I wanted to see following the loss to Opelika. They need to get back on track. And the main thing I'll say, though, is that they were able to get main running back Kobe Maxwell started. And I think this was the most carries he's had in the game all season, which is something that we at the broadcast crew thought that needed to have happen for the Wildcats to really be as successful as they could be.
You know, I was thinking about this last night as I was listening to Scott and Brett, and they were waxing poetic about Tyree Gray, and they should. I mean, he's incredible. He's really having a fabulous year. I wonder if there is one player in the state that is important to the team as Tyree Gray is to Benjamin Russell. I mean, it feels like everything begins and ends.
Outside that kid up in 280, right down the road, Sean Jennings, I would say outside of Jennings, I think that those two probably epitomize what being, I guess, so, you know, the important player on the team, but definitely those two. You can see what happened last week when Jennings goes out and what his effect is in this game. But going back to Benjamin Russell, yes, it's a completely different offense without Tyree out there, and it kind of expands the playbook when you have somebody who can make plays happen and extend plays. So that's definitely something he brings to the table. And you saw him air it out a little bit more last night, and so that was good to see.
Yeah, and you can talk about somebody like Ty Pigram at Clay Chalkville, who is fabulous. But if you took him out of the offense, you still have Nico Collins and you got T.J. Simmons at wide receiver, so somebody can get those two the ball some way. And it's not to say Benjamin Russell is a one-man team. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think that he is definitely the backbone of the team, and he's the one that everybody looks up to. When you listen to the broadcast, I don't get to go to a lot of BRHS games. I know you get to go to every one of them. It sounds like everything runs around Tyree Gray, even when he is not an integral part of the play necessarily. The threat of Tyree Gray being an integral part of the play is part of the reason that play is successful. And I think that he's huge to team chemistry. I'm a big Tyree Gray fan. I think that this is a guy that's going to deserve some serious recognition at the end of the season if things keep going the way they are. Can you spout off a few of his stats and team stats from last night?
He had, let's see, Tyree had 39 yards on 7 carries, 172 yards passing, 200-something yards of total, 210 yards of total offense for him.
Four total TDs?
4 total TDs, 3 rushing and 1 passing. And again, the touchdown pass was something really good to see. It was set up. Now, we could have probably scored on another play on that drive, or the drive before we missed a guy on a long pass, but he comes back. Chase Bird makes a kind of a Michael Dyer type of play and keeps the drive going. Then they dump it off and then give it to Nakobe Maxwell, 46 yards, and then they get another touchdown pass of, I think, 12. Yeah, from the 12-yard line. So, again, when you're able to do things like that with Nakobe Maxwell, it adds what you're able to do with Tyree, because if you add another option in the passing game, maybe not somebody that has to be a deep threat, maybe that Q Johnson was last year, but kind of an intermediate guy, what Cole Grogan has been serving. But from the dump-off perspective, they'll be able to do a lot of things with Nakobe, or with Tyree, knowing that he has that drop-back option there with Nakobe.
All right, let's switch over and talk about Dadeville for a second. Sean Jennings was back, and he was back in spades last night. At one point, I read via Twitter that he was 8 of 8 for X amount of 100 yards passing and maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns at the time. He was just absolutely dominating, and that was all midway through the first half. And he's a pretty incredible athlete. And talk about some of his stats from last night and what exactly did Dadeville do to win that game? Yeah,
and Dadeville beat Schillersburg 6-13 after getting kind of waxed last week. I think it was 65-31, something to that extent, with Beauregard last week, which is actually turning a lot of heads. I'm really impressed with what they've been able to do this season. But Sean Jennings, 10 for 10 on the night, 234 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, as you said, and most of that coming in the first half. I think he was 8 for 8 for 186 yards or something like that in the first half, and he had the 3 touchdowns. So as good as Tyree is for the Wildcats, or how integral he is to the offense, same thing goes for Jennings here. And I think that he's one of the top players in the state, not only in 4A, but in the state.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, again, we know his importance because last week when he went out during Beauregard. But, I don't even know with Sean Jennings if that would have helped against this Beauregard team, which is very, very surprising. And kudos to them for really stepping up their game. And they look like they're going to be certainly be a threat. Horseshoe Bend, we won't get into it a lot unless a caller calls in and wants to talk about it. But they give up a lead late to Lafayette, and then that game kind of gets away from them, the sort of the snowball effect. I know Benjamin Russell kind of knows what that's about against Opelika the previous week. A game that looks like a blowout really wasn't a blowout. It was just one of those games that got away from them in the end. Central Clay County, they end up being shut out by Leeds, and the disturbing part, I guess, for Central Clay, I said you couldn't glean a lot from it earlier, but maybe you can, because if you're Central Clay County, you've got to be concerned that you were shut out 23-0, and Leeds didn't play with Trey Nation, who is one of the top running backs in the state of Alabama. And in my opinion, he is more valuable to the Leeds offense than to Darrell Marshall, who is committed to the University of Tennessee. So I think if you're Central Clay County, and if I'm not mistaken, that game was actually played at Central Clay County, then maybe this is more cause for concern than I initially thought.
Yeah, and again, when we were talking about it during the broadcast, we thought that Central Clay had an opportunity to play with Leeds. Leeds is a very good football team, one of the top teams in the state, but they are not as competitive as they have been the last couple of seasons, I would say that. But it is somewhat disturbing. Again, Central Clay has 2 losses now. Now, granted, one of those is to Benjamin Russell, so that changes some things. But are they Central Clay's 5A?
Yes.
So then they've lost to a 6A team and a 4A team. So it doesn't really hurt them from the region side. And in 5A, there are not that many teams that I think that are better than them. Anybody in 5A, I think, for the most part, has an opportunity. Your top 5 to 7 teams, 5A isn't as deep as some of your other regions, or other classifications. But again, for the most part, this was a better week than last week. Obviously, nobody in the area won last week, putting up a 0. But this week, come back to life, especially with Benjamin Russell and David.
Few other scores locally. Let's just run them down. Benjamin Russell 35, Eufaula 7, Dadeville 60, Childersburg 13. Lafayette ends up beating Horseshoe Bend by 21, 52-31. But again, that game was close late in the third quarter. In fact, I think Horseshoe Bend actually had the lead, and then things just slip away from them. Midfield 40 and Central Coosa 14. Now, think about Midfield. They're not a bad football team at all. And Central Coosa had been playing well. I guess you could be moderately disappointed by that, but I don't think there's any shame in losing to Midfield that way.
They're on the right track, though.
I agree.
I think they're a team that we were looking at the schedule, probably could win 3 or 4 games, which that doesn't sound like a lot, but for a team that's been going 1-9 or 0-10, this definitely helps them going forward with the program.
Elmore County 43, Munford 42. The interesting story there is Munford last week beat Leeds 49-48. So 2 weeks in a row, Munford's in a 1-point thrilling game. And the last 2 weeks, the combined scores of the Munford games are 91-91. So if you want to see a fun game, buy a ticket to see Auburn High School play, which lost to Jeff Davis, and they've played 4 games. They're 1-3, and every game has been incredibly exciting. Or go check out Munford. One of those 2 teams, and you're guaranteed a fun game. It was Hanley 40, Holtville 20, Dothan 35, Stanhope 14. Stanhope is on the BRHS schedule, are they not? Again, we mentioned this right before the broadcast started. I said, does BRHS have somewhat of an Ohio State schedule working here? Because they've played their big game in Opelika. And then what? Because you look at a lot of the teams on their schedule, there's not a lot of daunting tasks, which is very good for Benjamin Russell. I mean, I think this is wonderful because I want these guys primed for a run late in the season. Tallahassee 44, Shelby County 28, Park Crossing 37, Wetumpka 10.
And hold on. In breaking news, I just have to say this. Edgewood beats Vandal Christian 67-0. Now, me and Randy had an extensive segment on this Tuesday, Lake Morning Sports Roundup. At what point do you just say, you know what, I'm tired of it? Like, as a player, maybe not so much as a player because, you want to win, but as a coach, like, I would want to test my skills to know whether or not that I'm just beating people because I have the superior talent, or either I don't know what it is, but 67-0, 61-0 last week. I mean, that's tough.
Well, that's the largest victory they've had they've won 60-something games in a row. I don't even remember how many it is in a row, but they've won 60-something in a row, and this is the largest victory of those 67 wins in a row. Yeah, I'm with you in one sense, but I'm against you in another sense. If you just it goes back to what we were saying at pre-show about the Ohio State schedule. They're just playing who's in front of them. I mean, and somebody is up. It's not Edgewood's job to make the other team better.
I understand.
So I can see it both ways, but I'm like you. If I were Edgewood, I'd probably want to play some other teams. That's going to lead us into a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little more high school, and then we'll jump into some college talk. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Saturday Sports Countdown.
Clear.
Wireless Advantage is Lake Martin's Verizon premium retailer, located in the Marketplace Shopping Center on Highway 280 in Alex City. We've got all the latest cell phones, along with the latest Wi-Fi internet products, home phone options, and
Welcome back to the Saturday Sports Countdown. Luke Robinson along with Scott Hardy and an audience of one, our producer, Justin Clayton, out there listening to us, giving us a round of applause. We appreciate that. Look, it's hard work being here 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday after a long night doing a scoreboard show, and Scott being on the sidelines and being a young single guy out and about in Alex City in the wee morning hours.
Single. Remember, I'm glad that you used that word. I'm just joking. I'm not going to use this as a platform to try to.
Did I get you in trouble by saying single? Am I not supposed to say single?
No, you should say single.
Okay.
That's exactly what you should say.
Okay, I'll keep it out there like that. Saturday Sports Countdown. Get your phone calls in. 256-234-6221, 256-234-6221. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to have our prediction for the day is going to be Oregon, Michigan State with the tiebreaker of Oregon passing yards. So really not a great day in SEC football when CBS is putting on Georgia Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt just got beat by Western Kentucky. And then there is Kentucky, South Carolina, and Mississippi State, LSU. But none of those games are really registering on the meter very much. I think there's some curiosity regarding LSU, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But, again, 256-234-6221. Get your predictions in for Oregon versus Michigan State, with the tiebreaker being Oregon passing yards. Let's talk a little statewide high school football. A couple of things out there. We'll keep this segment short. St. Paul's, they're upset last night by Jackson. And I say upset. It was a 1-versus-2 matchup, and Jackson comes out on top in 5A ball. And I think Jackson's going to be one of those teams. I mean, they've got a coach, Danny Holland. He is an incredible, incredible coach. And Jackson's one of those teams we've seen in the Super 6 or what is now the Super 7 before. And I think they're going to be a legitimate threat to maybe run the table.
Yeah, and again, Jackson is one of those teams we've seen, as you said, during the Super 7 for quite a while now, and they're usually one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the state, and that's nothing that's changing right now. Again, St. Paul's, though, is kind of that thorn in our side as well. If you're a local person here with Benjamin Russell, St. Paul's and Spanish Fort appear to be the 2 teams that have given us the most grief here during the playoffs. But again, I think those are probably still your top 2 teams in the state, and I look forward to seeing if they'll be able to face off again sometime during the playoffs. And
it really wasn't a fluke either. Now the game was played at Jackson. Jackson wins 23-7, and Jackson's only given up 13 points in 3 games this year, and they played a pretty potent St. Paul's offense. So I would suspect it's going to be tough to reach double digits against this Jackson team. They're going to certainly be a threat the rest of the season. Hoover and Oak Mountain play last night. What is it about Hoover and teams with Mountain in their name? Last week against Mountain Brook, they end up winning 21-14. They had been up 14-0. They give up 14 straight to Mountain Brook. That game's tight until Mountain Brook throws an interception midway through the 4th. Hoover capitalizes, and Mountain Brook can't get another score, so Hoover escapes 21-14. Then last night, Hoover goes up early, 7-0 in the first quarter. Quarterback Chris Vaccalara, he goes about 65 yards for a touchdown. You think they're going to run away with it? Well, lo and behold, next time I check the score is 14-10, Oak Mountain on top. Hoover ends up getting another late touchdown by Vaccalara, and they end up holding on and winning 17-14. But what is going on with Hoover? They face 2 teams, one out of Tennessee, one out of Georgia, I believe, one out of Florida, and they beat both of those. These are nationally ranked teams. Hoover takes care of them relatively easily. You come back to the state of Alabama, and you take on 2 teams that I think most everybody predicted Hoover would at least score in the 40s and probably win each game by 20, and they have to do everything they can to hold on. Is that a testament to the state of Alabama, or is that more of an issue for Hoover?
I'll say more of an issue for Hoover. Now, obviously, if Coach Nibble was listening to this, he wouldn't like what I'm about to say. But I think this has more to do with, as we were talking a little bit before the show, it's hard to get up every week, especially for a high school kid or high school team, to get up every single week. And so when you've played 2 teams out of the state who are considered, premier competition, there's nobody in the state of Alabama that should beat them ever. Well, not ever, but if they're both playing their best games, Hoover is the best team in the state, one of the top programs in the country. So I think, not to say that they don't play their best, but it's not the same as going to play a team out of Florida or a team out of Tennessee or Texas, and it's on TV, and then you have to come back and play, no offense to Oak Mountain, but that's not as a premier program as maybe somebody else is they're playing.
Clay Chalkville versus Hoover, if they played today, who would you take?
I'd say Clay. If they were playing today, I would take Clay Chalkville, though, yes.
I agree with you.
I would
They're
say
a
that,
classification down, but I'm totally right there with you. A team you should watch out for. Let's go down the top 10 of a few of these, and we won't highlight every single one, but in 7A, Hoover defeats Oak Mountain, as I just mentioned, 17-14. Prattville, 28. Smith Station, 7. Central Phoenix City, 39. Robert E. Lee, 20. Robert E. Lee is on the rebound a little bit, but not quite enough to beat Central Phoenix City. Bob Jones, 47. Sparkman, 28. Murphy is upset by Viger. Viger returns the opening kickoff, 90 yards for a touchdown, and then they end up going into overtime at 14-all, and Viger scores a touchdown. Murphy does not. Foley, they lose to Mary Montgomery. That's the thing about these Mobile teams. The Mobile area is the SEC West. Everybody can beat everybody. You cannot afford a letdown. And then Auburn, they were still ranked number 10 going into Thursday night. And Jeff Davis upsets them 36-35. I mean, I don't have all of Auburn's stats in front of me, Auburn High School stats, but I'm going to guess they've lost 3 games by a grand total of less than 10 points.
I agree. And I said, and I thought it was going to set up this way. When they lost that game to Opelika, that killed them because they needed, first off, it's your rivalry, but the way they lost the game, that would have really kind of cemented, I guess, the reemergence of what Auburn was trying to do, new coaching staff, new players. But the last couple of weeks, it's just kind of been some heartbreak. So hopefully they'll be able to get it together because high school football in the state of Alabama is better when Auburn's competitive.
I totally agree with you. I like to see the big names in high school football because it certainly brings the energy to either Bryant-Denny Stadium or Jordan Hare when the championships roll around. In 5A, you had St. Paul's. I mentioned that. They were upset. And then J.O. Johnson at number 8 was upset by East Limestone, even though that's not much of an upset because East Limestone's a pretty good program. I glossed over 6A, and I shouldn't have because Clay Chalkville at number 1, they take care of Huffman 41-7, I believe. Spanish Fort wins 52-14, and Saraland at number 3 wins 17-9 over Gulf Shores, setting up a monumental matchup next week between Spanish Fort and Saraland.
Yeah, and as much as I love this area for high school football, a couple of my buddies live down there, and they're transplants now. So one's an Opelika fan. He pulls for Gulf Shores, and the other one, my buddy Luke Chapman, he's a Spanish Fort guy now. So I've been having to hear a lot about them. But Spanish Fort, again, one of those teams, one of the premier teams in the state, and I'm really excited for that matchup against Saraland going against the defending state champion.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the high school portion of the Saturday Sports Countdown. If you have anything you wanted to talk about, though, we will certainly take your phone call, 256-234-6221. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we'll jump into the college side of things. No, we're not back. Better not be back.
No, not yet.
You do sound
We're up,
like
though.
how I feel.
No, yeah. What time did you get home last night? This Daniel?
Yeah, what's up?
What time did you get home last night?
About 1 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Day of Auburn today
I
at
stayed up
33
and did the football game.
0777 and visit them online at HyundaiofAuburn.com.
Saturday Sports Countdown, Luke Robinson along with Scott Hardy here at JR Sports Bar and Grill. And really, I was going to say no place I'd rather be, but I can think of at least one place I'd rather be, maybe at home in bed.
That would be it. Absolutely.
But you know what? Sometimes you just got to start your broadcast a little early because Auburn and Jacksonville State will be taking one another at Jordan-Hare Stadium here at 11 o'clock on the SEC Network. And that's one of the drawbacks to when you're in the SEC and everybody makes a bunch of money. They're going to dictate when you play football, and they're going to make you play football at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and I'm glad that initially when you started with that sentence, I thought this was going to be somewhat of a jab at Auburn, and it didn't become one. It sounded like it was about to happen, so I was waiting.
You know me, don't you?
Yeah, but you're right, and hopefully – now, I will say this. They did put Alabama at 3 o'clock and Auburn at 11 o'clock, so if that does mean anything, I guess that does show that. But, again, I think it's going to be a very electric atmosphere on the Plains, the new video board now being displayed, and I think that'll attract a lot of people, especially some of your people who probably wouldn't go to these types of games are going to go strictly because of that. Although it is the first home game, I think that adds a little more to it tonight or today.
Yeah, 11 o'clock does take a little bit of the luster off of it, and I mean, Alabama's going to have an 11 o'clock game too. You can just bet your bottom dollar on it. I don't know when the SEC is going to move all these around. They try to be as fair as they can about some of these. I think the SEC Network game day, quote unquote, is at Vanderbilt today because they have to go to every stadium, and you better go to Vanderbilt early because if you try to go to them late, they're going to be really putrid. They're still putrid right now. It's just they're going to be really bad then, and it's probably not going to draw as much interest. So let's talk about Auburn and Jacksonville right now. What are you looking for from Auburn? I mean, look, the line is plus or minus 40. So Auburn's not going to have any trouble winning this game. But Jacksonville State did beat Ole Miss in 2010. That Ole Miss 2010 team isn't this Auburn 2015 team by a long stretch. But I think Jacksonville State could make this a hair bit closer than experts believe if Auburn doesn't have some of their ducks in a row. What are you looking for the Tigers today?
Well, I will say I don't think they're going to cover 40 points. I don't think that happens. But the main thing, obviously, I want to see a more accurate Jeremy Johnson, and I just want to see him have more moxie in the pocket and a little more confidence. I think that's the biggest thing is that could – I don't want last week's performance to deflate his confidence any. And although I don't think it will, this is really your only tune-up you have before LSU, obviously Louisville's first game of the season, so you're not really – implementing your entire offense and that type of thing. So you're trying to work on some things from week 1 to week 2, which is when teams get the best improvement is week 1 to week 2. But I hate that it's Jacksonville State and then going right to LSU because I think LSU will be a little more prepared. They already have to play in a hostile environment, Mississippi State today, and then they'll go on and then Auburn hosts them next week. So I think that this is a much more important game from a workshop, I guess, perspective for Auburn than anything else.
Yeah, and that's really all you can talk about in these two games for Alabama and Auburn today. And I can give you some positives why Alabama playing Middle Tennessee State is good, et cetera, et cetera. But, in the end, these are both 35 to 40-point spreads for a reason. Both of these teams should cruise today. So I think one of the key aspects for Auburn, my strong thing for them would be don't get anybody else hurt. I mean, Auburn had a flurry of injuries. It's debatable how severe any of them were in the Louisville game. But you hear things about Carl Lawson, for instance. He's been on crutches all week, but did he really need the crutches? And then you have all these medical experts, sudden medical experts saying, well, it didn't look like he was using the crutch that much, or he would. Look, if you got crutches, you got crutches. I mean, that's the end of it. If I were Carl Lawson, if I were coaching Auburn, I would probably hold him out today. I mean, I don't see any reason in the world why you would want to play him, and when you've got LSU coming up next week.
Yeah, and initially I was kind of on that bandwagon where I was like, maybe he plays 20, 25 snaps and just make sure he's good to go going forward. He needs the reps more than anybody out there for the most part. I mean, obviously he hadn't played. I mean, last week he only played a half of football, so he's played a half of football in a year basically. But I don't think you should play him. Trey Matthews probably shouldn't play. I mean, we're not in an opportunity depth-wise where Auburn can afford to lose anybody on the defensive side of the ball, especially those two players in particular. So I will say that Carl Lawson, as impressive as he was, I think Trey Matthews is probably our best defensive player. Mm-hmm. Maybe not the most impactful, but he is our best defensive player. But, again, I just want to see a clean performance, no turnovers, and just get to the house and get ready. Hopefully, there's third-string guys coming in third quarter.
There is one other thing I would say that goes against my normal train of thinking, and that's that I would play Jeremy Johnson maybe a little longer, assuming this is going to be the blowout. I believe it will. I would play him a little longer and let him get in a good rhythm. Let him. You're right about the moxie and get the confidence back and have that going into LSU next week. And, yeah, I mean, there may be some people that say, well, you left him in there to pad his stats. So what? Let it pad his stats. I mean, get his mind right because he's going to be going into a pretty hostile environment next week. Now, some of that will be dictated on whether or not LSU wins, I think. LSU, of course, their game was canceled last Saturday against McNeese State. I think that's a pretty big deal. I don't think you can downplay that because now you've got a quarterback situation at LSU where, yeah, I mean, Mississippi State hadn't seen them, and that's what Dan Mullen was trying to spin. I would much rather be in Mississippi State shoes than I would be in LSU shoes coming into tonight's game.
Especially when you're not really – your quarterback situation is as shaky as LSU's is, where you don't really know what you're going to get out of the position. So last week would have been a good opportunity to kind of see what you have, maybe see what works in certain situations. Now, obviously, it would be McNeese State, so you wouldn't see too much. But I think from just getting prepared, it's a lot easier to get prepared for game one when it's McNeese State than it is when it's Mississippi State. So LSU comes into it. I thought a team that could contend, I still do, for the SEC West crown, and to go immediately into SEC play your first game of the season is a little daunting, but I think that you'll have a good football game nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this is going to be a fun game tonight. And really, I think LSU will win at Mississippi State. I just don't know that Mississippi State has the experienced horses. They may have the talent, but I think that talent is all pretty inexperienced. And LSU, I think, wins tonight. But if LSU were to drop this game, I think that bodes very, very well for Auburn, not just because it means LSU can be beat, nothing like that, because I think you could see the entire feeling, the mindset for LSU drop several notches. All of a sudden, look, you go into Mississippi State, a team that universally was picked last in the SEC West by just about every pundit, and you lose that game, I mean, your chances of winning the West are virtually slim and none. And LSU, historically, if they get down and they're not going to be very good, they can tank. And so I would feel this would bode very well for Auburn if LSU were to drop this game. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the Auburn-Jacksonville game here in just a second on the Saturday Sports Countdown. Get your phone calls in, 256-234-6221.
For all your personal needs, including auto, boat, homeowners, and disability. Don't be in the dark. Call Dark Insurance at 256-234-5026.
I'm here to tell you about the ultimate cooking experience.
Used to spend my nights out in the ballroom.
Hey, everybody. All right, here we go.
Liquor was the only love I'd known.
Ask and ye shall receive. Scott requested this bumper music, and he gets it. What do you think?
I'm pretty impressed with Daniel. He never lets me down on my bumper music. So that's my new jam for the week is Tennessee Whiskey, Chris Stapleton.
You get a new jam a week? Is that the deal?
I'm going to try to do that every week on the show. I'm going to give you a new jam of the week.
Scott is our window into the youth of our country, our city. And
I hope not.
it's a very weird window. We probably need to pull the shade down.
Yeah, it's 10.
You're listening to the Saturday Sports Countdown. Luke Robinson along with Scott Hardy here today. And, of course, Auburn is about to be taking on Jacksonville State here at 11 o'clock on the SEC Network. I know a lot of people are probably on their way there now. Alabama will be taking on Middle Tennessee State at 3 o'clock today. But let's go back to Auburn, Jacksonville State for this last segment of the hour, Scott. And, okay, so we've talked about Jeremy Johnson. Think he needs to stay in a little bit longer maybe and just get his sea legs under him. I mean, I'm willing to chalk up last week to just one of those bad performances. You know, one of my things is always if you're a good football team, you're going to play your best 2 or 3 times a year. You're going to play your worst 1 or 2 times a year, and everything in the middle is who you are. And I think that if you translate that into a player, Jeremy Johnson played one of his 2 worst games last week. And so I still think he's going to be fine. And for the most part, he's going to be better than that. And in some instances, he'll be a lot better than that. And so today, let him just get his sea legs under him, let him find his rhythm again, and get him ready for LSU and then Mississippi State the week after that.
Yeah, and, 11 for 21 in the air for Jeremy. And granted, though, the numbers weren't that great at all. He almost had 6 interceptions, 5 or 6 interceptions in the game. And I mean, they were bad throws. 3 of them were extremely bad. But I think it was really just the fact that he's got the type of arm that is NFL ready. And I think that he's got a little more confidence. And Malzahn said it, he got a little greedy in some of the plays. But that I don't like to see the decision making. I can deal with an interception that, if it's thrown down the field or something, it's a jump ball and that happens, whatever. But those are some poor passes and it was poor decision making. So again, for somebody who's been in the system since, he's been 8th or 9th grade, somebody I feel like should be more comfortable in the offense. Now, granted, it didn't look like it was too much going on in the offense, offensive or defense. I think you saw pretty much a base of what Auburn's going to do this season. But and you'll see the same thing today. But I really, on the offensive side of the ball, I'd like to see what's going to happen with the running back situation. Obviously, I don't know if it'll matter who gets the bulk of the carries today. But if Peyton Barber continues to get the carries, then that's somebody who comes from the third-string spot, now takes the starting spot going into LSU.
Yeah, I think Peyton Barber is a really good story. He was a practice legend last year, or maybe in the last couple of years. People just thought, okay, this guy's unstoppable in practice. And then you think, why isn't he getting some carries? I think there were some injury issues and maybe some other issues out there. But he looked good the other night. Over 100 yards against Louisville. And when he ran with authority. He hit the hole hard. All those things you look for in a strong running back. Rock Thomas, to me, I think is still going to be the number 1 guy as the season progresses. But is Peyton Barber going to get the start today?
I haven't seen it. I mean, I don't know. The thing is, in Gus's offense, I don't think it really matters who's the start. Now, game 5 or 6 it does. But this portion of the season, I think he's still trying to figure out who the workhorse is going to be and kind of where everybody fits in, because a lot of people saw playing time Saturday, which is a good thing. I was impressed with what Jason Smith is going to be able to bring to the table. He and Ricardo Lewis kind of being that Ontario McCaleb guy, which we haven't had. Quan Bray wasn't the same type of player as McCaleb. So I think that adds that portion back to the offense. And again, I want to see Jeremy run a little bit more of the read option. A lot of his were handoffs, and so he's not going to do a lot of run. I know that's not his thing, but I think his ability to run is going to enhance the offense even more because, again, the whole summer, all I touted was Nick Marshall, 57, 58%. Jeremy Johnson should sit around 70, 72, and that changes everything. That's third down completions. That's more first downs. That's more touchdowns. So, again, he didn't really make me look that good week one, but I think that you'll see hopefully a different version of Jeremy Johnson this week.
It's so funny, and I can attest to this as an Alabama fan, that when you really sometimes cuss a player that's been pretty good for you and you think things are going to be so much better with the next guy, you realize pretty quickly, okay, we had it okay under that guy. I mean, Nick Marshall's that player to me. I mean, he's a guy that say what you want to. I mean, he had his limitations. There's no doubt. And occasionally he got a fortuitous bounce that could be explained away, whatever. But he was a strong player, and he ran that offense like a well-oiled machine more often than not.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie. He's probably, outside of Cam, he's one of my favorite players in Auburn history. I loved watching him play because the storyline behind it was so good. I mean, you take a defensive back, and then in 2 years he takes you to an SEC championship and national championship appearance, put up 44, almost 70, I guess 70 plus points. 70 plus points in Alabama. So I think that he's the type of player that Nick Marshall was a mix, I think, of kind of what you see on the high school level sometimes. He's your best player on the field, but he does have his limitations, which will prevent you from actually getting to where you need to be as a team. But as long as he's on the field, you'll be as competitive as possible.
Well, because he's so good at everything, he probably will never reach his ceiling at anything because he's a jack of all trades, moving around all over the place. I mean, the NFL right now, he's back at defensive back. I don't even know if is he still with the Jaguars? Okay. So he made the roster? Or is he with the practice squad?
I think he's practice squad.
Okay. Well, still, that's a heck of an accomplishment for a guy that spent the last 2 years playing college quarterback. But it's one of those things, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. And I'm not saying Jeremy Johnson is a good quarterback. I think he's going to be a really strong quarterback. But Nick Marshall was running things pretty well, and I think he made people remember very quickly why he was the starter the last 2 years over Jeremy Johnson. But Jeremy's just going to have to find his own way and do his own thing. He's a different style of quarterback altogether. You rarely see the level of speed and athleticism that you saw in Nick Marshall and the arm strength. I mean, his accuracy was off, but without his arm strength, I mean, the catch against Georgia isn't possible.
Yeah, and again, we've all seen Jeremy play. I mean, we watched him grow up through the high school ranks, and people from the local area has seen him come and beat Benja Russell twice. So, I mean, everybody knows the storyline and everybody knows the potential there. So it was one of those things where I think there was just so much hype and expectation for him coming in. He, along with Muschamp, were the reasons, I think the two primary reasons why they were getting chosen to be a playoff team or SEC championship contender. So I know it's only game one, and I'm not one of those people who, throws so much into it because, we talked about, you called it in the sports call. I think had he had 275, 3 touchdowns, I'd be saying the same thing. It is still just game one, so I just want to see what's going to happen as he progresses because, Louisville's a very good football team. They'll probably win 9 games this season, but they're not Texas A&M, LSU, Alabama, those guys. So that's what I'm concerned about. When he gets in that type of environment, what's going to happen then?
Well, the good news, last Saturday they didn't play Texas A&M, Alabama. So, I mean, that's a very good thing for Auburn, I think. I want to get into Texas A&M. I'm glad you touched on them. I want to get into talking about them a little bit later on and the effect John Chavis has already had with that crowd because, my goodness, I was impressed with them against Arizona State. We're going to go ahead and take another break. When we come back, we'll talk a little Alabama football, and then we'll get into the SEC and college football around the country. You're listening to the Saturday Sports Countdown from JR Sports Bar and Grill. We'll be back in just a minute with more.
Lunch doesn't have to be the same old fast food or burgers in your busy day.
30 to bunt.
Nancy, what?
I may start doing it on my.
Brought to you by Russell Dewitt Center, offering a complete assortment of lumber, building materials, electrical, and plumbing supplies. Russell Dewitt Center stores deliver first-class service, top-rate products, and competitive do-it-best pricing.
All right.
You can name who this is, Luke. I'll go to every Alabama football game the rest of the season. Every home game, I'll go to name one of the people in the song.
Name, is it a group or a person?
It's two people in this.
Milli Vanilli?
I'm glad you got it wrong. No, it's T.I. and Eminem. Touchdown. See, it's kind of fitting for today.
Oh, okay. I dig that. Is this a new song?
No, it's a little older. Maybe like 08.
You know, I'll tell you, I'm really embarrassed. I was driving back from Birmingham yesterday, and I don't do this often because I'm a sports radio guy. Obviously, I like to listen to sports talk radio because it gives you more to talk about when you're on the radio. But yesterday, I just had the feeling, all right, I've got to go do the scoreboard show. I'm going to be talking at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm going to have college football day. I'm going to listen to a little music. And I clicked on my Pandora app, and I'm looking at it going, if anybody ever saw my Pandora app, they would ridicule me mercilessly. So I think I'm going to delete that. I still have old music from like when my daughter, who is now 8, when I have music from her 2-year-old birthday on my phone. And it was like a sock hop kind of thing. So, I was like, why do I have all this 1950s music? I don't even like 1950s. And I had to remember, I just don't, music's not my thing. I know it's your thing. But regardless, yeah, I think this music thing's really going to take off, by the way. I think it's going to work.
Good call.
Yeah. We want to welcome in Brett Pritchard now, the play-by-play voice of the BRHS Wildcats. And, of course, monster Auburn homer for all things Sports Blitz. Brett, how are you doing today?
Yeah, just got to equal the monster Alabama home, Luke. So, hey, I heard you guys, talking tennis this morning. Is it breakfast at Sports Blitz?
It is.
Breakfast at Wimbledon or U.S. Open or whatever.
Chris just walked in. I was hoping he was going to have some strawberries and cream for me.
Well, I won't even touch that. I'll just leave that one alone. I'll let that one slide. But last night, I'll start with Ben Russell since that's how I introduced. I thought the Wildcats did a good job getting back off the snide and coming out and really taking control of the game. We're able to rest the majority of their starters for about a quarter and a half, which was really good. It was just like last year. Came off of a tough loss against Opelika. Come back with a dominating win over a much improved Eufaula team. I know that Eufaula team had its struggles last year, but they had really dominated a couple opponents. They were 2-0, very physical, big, fast, had a lot of speed on their side. So very impressed with Eufaula, but I was more impressed with how the Wildcats rebounded.
Yeah, Brett, I mentioned it earlier in the broadcast talking about Tyree Gray, the quarterback for Benjamin Russell. And honestly, maybe outside of Sean Jennings, I don't know anybody in the state of Alabama that's more valuable to their team, because it sounds like all things run through him, and not just the plays necessarily, but the team chemistry as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is by far the team leader for Benjamin Russell. And, you get a guy that, think about this time last year, he was just really getting his feet wet as a quarterback, learning the system. Just came off of that Opelika game where, obviously that was a tough game to really get into, second game of the year. But just to see how much he improved all throughout last year and to see what kind of a confident leader. I mean, I'm going to go out and say that last week against Opelika, Tyree was the best player on the field that day. And every game that we'll play for the rest of the year, all the way into the playoffs, it's going to be hard-pressed to line up against a team that has a better player than him. And that says a lot in 6A football. And we know that there's some good football teams in 6A, but Tyree Gray has really separated himself, guys. And I know that he's a special player. He's a senior quarterback. And you got to like Ben Russell's chances every time you go on the field with a guy like him.
Yeah, well, speaking of going on the field, Brett, next week, Pell City comes to town. We'll get back into region play. Can you give us a little preview of what to expect next week?
Yeah, Pell City was a team last year that kind of gave us a little bit of a fit up there. Took us a little bit of time to get going offensively. I thought our defense kept us where we needed to be in that game last year. So this team has some talent. They are one of the teams that I project to be one of the 4 qualifiers out of our region. I think that it'll be definitely Opelika and us and 1 and 2, unless Opelika has some type of upset somewhere. But I think it'll be Opelika, then us, and then Pell City will be in there fighting for that position of number 4, I think. And Chelsea, I think, will end up earning position 3. So this is a region qualifying team, in my opinion. So I think, the Wildcats will have to be ready. They don't need to play flat. I heard your analysis, Luke, of, I think that goes across the board with all teams. You play one game really bad, one game really good, or a couple games really good, and then the rest in between is who you are. Well, I think last night was who the Wildcats really are. I think that's the team that you'll see from now on throughout the season, and then you'll see sometimes us be a little bit even better than that. So I hope we got our one bad game out of the way at Opelika.
Brett, let's jump over and talk about Auburn. They got a game against Jacksonville State today. Of course, the unveiling of the gigantic scoreboard today that's probably going to be the biggest attraction to the game, I think, because Auburn should handle Jacksonville State relatively easily. They're a 40-point favorite. What are you looking for out of the Tigers today?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the Jumbotron. I think that is definitely going to be a draw. A lot of people excited about being able to come in and see this just monstrous structure on the east side of the field, and it's a little overcast now. So you were thinking about it being a bright sunny day, so that thing's going to be lit up even more this morning, I think, with some overcast skies. But that's definitely the big draw. But Jacksonville State, I think Gus Malzahn was genuine in what he was talking about this week with an FCS opponent in Jacksonville State that's ranked in the top 5 in their division. They've got great football players. They have a tradition of winning. This is a team that's used to winning a lot. They're not an FCS opponent that's a doormat. They know that the cards are stacked against them, but they're going to come in with some pretty good athletes. And you look across the front line, they look like a SEC type team with the type of talent that they have across the front. And they've got 2 former Auburn players on this team, and in Sigler, Devontae Sigler, and Chris Landrum, and we all remember him from Sweetwater. And an interesting note that we'll get to watch today is our very own Bryant Horn from Benjamin Russell High School will be over there on the Jacksonville State side, and he'll be playing and lining up at linebacker some. So I'm excited to see him out there playing for Jacksonville State. I wish him a great game today, and but I think Auburn. I think I heard you guys talking earlier. I think Jeremy Johnson needs to play a little bit longer, Luke. Like you said, I think he needs to get in there and get a rhythm. The game did not progress the way he wanted it to go last week, nor the way Auburn fans and coaching staff wanted it to go. So need to get him in there and get him back to a comfort level. I think Carl Austin and Trey Matthews will play today. But I don't think they'll be in there very long. I think they want to go in there and give them a test, see how things are working, and then they'll probably pull them out pretty quickly. But I would hope that Auburn would be able to come out and take control of this game pretty quickly.
And really quickly, Brett, want to mention something else. Got an email from a guy that has done some work in the Alexander City Outlook, like I have for a while, written articles, big USC fan, and he mentions, hey, look, why is Auburn playing Jacksonville State there in the FCS? Why does Alabama play FCS teams? They should outlaw those games. You look at somebody like USC, and they don't ever play a FCS teams. And I look at USC's schedule, and I see Arkansas State and Idaho. No, they're not FCS, but I'll tell you what, I would stack Jacksonville State up against some of these other teams that are in the either the other 5 conferences or the Power 5 conferences and say, okay, take your shot. Because you look at somebody like Jacksonville State, to me, that's a decent enough test. They have a lot of transfers from Auburn, as you mentioned. They have transfers from other schools. This is not necessarily a give-to-me game. Yes, Auburn's a big favorite. They should win big. But what's the difference in playing them and playing in Idaho?
Yeah, I totally agree, Luke. And I think that's just more anti-SEC sentiment throughout the nation. Anybody outside of the Southeast is going to take a shot at the Southeastern Conference. And, look, I'm not buying anything the Pac-12 saying. I'm not buying anything the Big Ten saying. When you only have a couple of teams to mention, I mean, let's look at Stanford, for example. You know, Stanford's supposed to be one of those top teams in the Pac-12. They went to Northwestern and looked horrible. I mean, athletically, they looked horrible. They didn't look like they had any kind of rhythm on offense. Their defense was not very good. So if that's what you're throwing out as your best, you know, you and I took a segment a few weeks ago on this show and tried to come up with the top 2 teams out of every conference to come to combat or to equal the SEC. And we had a hard time doing it, Luke. So that tells you how diluted and watered down everybody else is. It's just sentiment against the SEC. And look, you play these teams like an Idaho and those teams like that, they're no different than a Jacksonville State opponent. And I think that the Big Ten coming out and saying that, oh, we're not going to play FCS opponents and all that, a bunch of junk. Because look, the Big Ten, their schedule, when you want to compare what Ohio State's going to play the rest of the year and the USC's going to play versus what Auburn and Alabama's going to play, you'll see why we schedule a couple of FCS opponents.
Great call, Brett. Thanks for being on with us. We'll see you soon, buddy.
Thanks, guys.
Worry about it.
That was Brett Pritchard. Oh, you had to sneak that in.
Yeah.
That was Brett Pritchard, the voice of the BRHS Wildcats. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Saturday Sports Countdown.
That means
Yeah, listen.
Sports Blitz is brought to you by Bice Motors in Alexander City. Brian and his crew offer the latest lines of Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, and Ram vehicles, as well as the best used inventory around. Guaranteed lowest price. Bice.
Yeah, Archie, baby. Look to the stars.
I get on in 3.
Saturday Sports Countdown. Scott, you gonna make a bet with me that I know who this is?
Well, he had a little preface there to start the song. I'm really
He
impressed.
did. He gave it away because I was going to say Tim McGraw. Am I off?
I mean, I don't know how. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. But I'm extremely impressed with Daniel in the back when this bumper music. I think bumper music is such an essential part of the show.
Oh, I totally agree.
I think it's one of the better parts of the show. So definitely keep it up back there.
It was one of the reasons I listened to Scott Van Pelt and Ryan Rossillo's show. Scott Van Pelt has left that show.
Do you like the midnight?
I'm not Van Pelt. To me, I mean, it seems like everybody loves him. I'd like Colin Cowherd more. I thought Colin Cowherd brought more to the table. I think Van Pelt is very knowledgeable, and I think that he is good at what he does. But he just didn't appeal to me as much as, and I like Rossillo a lot, but there's something about Rossillo that can be rather combative at times. And I think he takes things a little too personally occasionally, but I think Rossillo is very, very good. I'm not a fan of Danny Cannell, who is now taking the spot of Scott Van Pelt, and that makes things kind of rough. I can't listen to the show anymore because Cannell's just – and Joey Galloway. We're going to start talking about Alabama now, by the way. Joey Galloway released his top 6 after last week, after the Ohio State game, after Labor Day, after everything. He released his top 6 teams in the country, okay? And I don't know the top 6. I just know Alabama wasn't in it. And then I know Desmond Howard called into Feinbaum, and Marcus Spears, who was on the show, mentioned to him, hey, look, what do you think about Alabama? And Desmond Howard said, that's just not a good look. That's just admitting to the world, I'm biased. I'm not picking Alabama. I just don't like them, don't want to pick them. And I don't mind analysts being homers. I mean, I'm a homer. Brett's a homer. Randy's a homer. You're a homer. We try not to let it infiltrate everything we do. I mean, I would, if I sat up here and said, I don't think Jeremy Johnson's a good quarterback and never will be, I'd be a fool. Okay. I think he's great. I've seen him in high school. I'm a fan of Jeremy Johnson. I can separate Alabama and Auburn to say, I think Jeremy Johnson's a good player. I think Kerryon Johnson's a good player, and I'm for him. I'm pulling for him. I've watched him come up through the ranks. So I'm not going to be that guy. Joey Galloway comes off as that guy. If you can't put Alabama in your top 6 right now, you're telling the world I can't be unbiased.
Well,
you agree or disagree?
I agree with that. I mean, he was kind of having his Danny Cannell moment as well. And I'm a big Galloway fan. He's an Ohio State guy, and obviously that has a lot to do with, I guess, his rankings. But nationally, and I know we're going to talk about Alabama, but again, do you think that the problem with the SEC, I'm not going to say problem, but the SEC West gets so much praise, or the SEC as a whole and the SEC West in particular gets so much praise, but is it really – I mean, if you look at the records, although they are beating top 25 teams, that's what they're considered. But if you look at 8-4 and 8-4, it's still the same thing, whether you're in the Big 10 or Big 12 or whatever. So that's my only gripe I have with it when you say, well, an 8-4 Mississippi State team is better than a 7-5 Purdue, which obviously they are. But I'm just saying like that it's the same thing. Regardless, you're not going to the SEC championship or your conference championship or the national championship. So it doesn't really matter if you're not one of the top 10, 12 programs in the country.
Yeah, I agree with you. But again, and usually I don't let anything Galloway does bother me because I just don't respect him as an analyst. I mean, it's hard to when you say things like that. I liked him. I loved him as a player. I thought Joey Galloway was explosive and a lot of fun to watch. But then as an analyst, when you see things like that, you say, look, name 6 teams you think are better, because that's the problem. I mean, and if he were to preface it by saying, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way you can preface it, to be quite honest with you, because look, let's talk about Alabama now. Their performance against Wisconsin last week, I think this is more one of those. I don't think it was Alabama's best game. And there were certainly some moments that were wild. And it was really, in a lot of ways, opposite day. I thought Jake Coker was going to struggle with his short game and his decision-making and his intermediate passes. and I thought his deep ball would be fantastic. It was the exact opposite of that, Scott. He woefully underthrew Ardarius Stewart one time on a deep ball that was wide open for a touchdown, just totally ill-timed. And then he also underthrew and threw a little bit too much to the inside of Calvin Ridley once. And, you know, in true Barner fashion, I'm getting run off the radio right now before I can even get into the Alabama discussion. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little Alabama Crimson Tide football here on the Saturday Sports Countdown.
Here.
Stay in Auburn. I need to get back. That's my only thing.
All right, we're up. You got work?
40 to bump.
Oh, the girl I kind of like. She's a Bama fan. The Kings segment was pretty solid.
15 to bump. All right,
My friend,
Got another challenge for me?
Nah, I kind of know this.
Bill Withers.
This is my favorite song that he play. We have to play it every Saturday if I'm doing the show.
I dig this show. I dig this song.
Yeah, I love it. But yeah, this has been a pretty good show. We're almost done, and we made it an hour and a half without having to talk about Alabama.
I know it's your dream show. Well, we won't spend a ton of time talking about Alabama either because I want to get into some national scene stuff. And really, Alabama's playing Middle Tennessee State, and they're 35-point favorite, and yada yada yada. Couple of
real
things.
quickly though, Derrick Henry, real deal. I didn't think that. Obviously, I knew how good he was, but he looked tremendous. And then everybody's kind of been pumping up Drake, and he definitely lived up to kind of what I thought that he would, what people are expecting him to be. So, again, I'm not going to say they're Lindell White and Reggie Bush, but that's definitely going to be a good 1-2 combo for Kiffin.
I agree. I was worried. I thought Derrick Henry was a good back. I didn't think he was a great back. I thought he was, and I think he is a great back now. His blitz pickup was fantastic. He missed one block all day. I thought that he caught the ball a couple of times, looked good doing that. And he does run a little upright, but it doesn't matter because he's so big. And his vision was good. He hit the hole hard. All the things I was concerned about. Again, it was opposite day. I thought that he would look good running downhill and not be so good when the line is a little jammed up, and he did fantastic doing that. And then Kenyon Drake, I was worried about the potential of what if he doesn't get off to a great start? Is he going to go into pouty possum mode, which he has done in the past? He didn't do that. He had a fantastic 40-plus run yard. Wow, I messed that sentence up. 40-yard-plus run later in the game for a touchdown. Looked fantastic, showed some strength, showed some speed and some moves.
What about your boy, Mr. Scott? That's kind of been
J.K. Scott. That you talk about opposite day. J.K. Scott to me, wow. I a Robinson jinx in full effect because I have done nothing but sing this kid's praises. And let's chalk it up to one of those bad games. That's what I'm going to do. But I'm scared that somebody has coached him into a position where he's just an average punter now, because it's sort of like Tiger Woods. You're winning championships as quick as you can. Then you say, I'm going to get a new swing coach and I'm going to try something different. Well, I had somebody tell me about 2 weeks ago regarding business that if the only way to take a good employee and make a bad employee is to try and take a good employee and make him a better employee. If something's going well, don't touch it. Let it go. I mean, keep an eye on it. I mean, you don't maintain it, but don't tweak it anymore to make it any better. I mean, this trying to make something better potentially can make something worse. And it seems that J.K. Scott somehow has gotten the yips, the punter variety of the yips. And hopefully he can work through that. We probably won't see him a ton today, so we might not see him work it out. But against Ole Miss, you're going to see it. And Alabama's going to need him. Ole Miss's defense is on par with Alabama's as far as I'm concerned, even though they had a big injury this past week along their defensive line. But so that's a game that I'm really going to keep an eye on. But I'll tell you, I'll say this about the Middle Tennessee State game. I think this is one of those cases where Nick Saban's always looking ahead. You schedule a team like Middle Tennessee State because they run that hurry up. They scored 70 points last week. They're the style of offense of Texas A&M, kind of the style of offense of Auburn, not necessarily, but they run that same. It's in the area code, the hurry up, the get to the line. So you're going to play a team that you should be able to easily beat, but you're going to play them in the style that you're going to get used to so that when you face these other teams, you know what's going on. And I'm very happy about this game. Look, I don't know that Alabama will cover today. I would probably say I'm leaning to Middle Tennessee State covering that 35-point spread, but I'm very excited about Alabama's having to face an offense like this and at least be moderately challenged.
Yeah, and again, I really do want to see how Coker is game 1 to game 2. Now, granted, I know this is not the same thing. It won't be the same test as Wisconsin or LSU, or excuse me, Ole Miss, but Coker being the starter now is only one game. I just want to see what's going to happen. But I don't think you'll get too much out of Middle Tennessee State. But I do think it's good that, you guys do have a quarterback now. At least I think that's over with now, and you can go ahead and kind of start game planning for that. And for him, I don't know. I wasn't in the camp of Coker. I actually thought that Cooper Bateman was going to be the guy who got it. And he may at some point be the starter. I know you've alluded to you didn't think that Coker may end up staying, but maybe that changes. Wisconsin game changes your opinion a little bit. But I really don't think it matters. I'll never say that. I used to say that, it does matter, but I really done watching what Henry was able to do and seeing what you're able to add to the passing game with Drake. I think he'll be a great complementary option there with Stewart. So I think that whoever is taking snaps will be pretty good for Alabama.
Yeah, and I think today, like you said, it's not going to be the big challenge. I think the big challenge is going to be next week. And really, I'm more worried about Coker's playing in Bryant-Denny against Ole Miss at 8:15 next Saturday night than I would be if he were playing at Ole Miss, because at least we could explain some of that away. Well, he's playing on the road. I'm worried that the enormity of the situation may suffocate him in Bryant-Denny, but that's something we can talk about next week. And one other thing I wanted to mention that I was very excited about, Calvin Ridley. I'm really, really excited about this kid. He didn't put up monster stats. Actually, Robert Foster led Alabama in receiving last week with 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. And Robert Foster is a very good player. But Ridley, his get-off on the line was incredible. And he beat his man deep. Coker just underthrew it and threw it to the inside, allowing the defender to catch up one time. That should have easily been 6 points. And then the few catches he had, he went up and he snatched the ball out of the air. You can see receivers a lot of time, they sort of guide the ball into their body, and Ridley wants the ball at the high point position, which is something football coaches teach a lot. And I think he just wants to attack the defense as soon as he gets his hands on the ball. I'm very excited about the future of this young man. And O.J. Howard, it was good to see him. I mean, I feel like O.J. Howard's been on a milk carton ever since his freshman year LSU game. And he had a big catch, a catch like he did against Arkansas last year.
He's going to be a premier pro, though. I think when he gets to the pro, I know that.
Still got to work on blocking, though, man.
Yeah, but I think we've seen kind of what they've been able to do with somebody like a Jimmy Graham. The NFL is setting up now where they'll get another tight end in there. Like Gronk's not the best blocker, but they bring in Scott Chandler to kind of help that out a little bit. So I think that his potential on the NFL level will be great, but I really think this could be the year. Hopefully, I'm a big O.J. Howard fan, so hopefully this year he starts to get the receptions and touchdowns that we were hoping he'd see.
When we come back, we'll talk more SEC football. Get your phone calls in, 256-234-6221.
Mm. 1 minute to bump. $45. Y'all there?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Because of the Auburn game and all that stuff, we're gonna have to cut y'all out a couple minutes early. So this is gonna be kind of a short segment.
Don't hurt our feelings.
Coming back to make up for at the very end. But I'll guide you. It'll be easy.
Okay.
Tend to bump.
He did good.
Gone, bitch.
Yeah.
Just a good kid.
You can bench press JRs. I mean. Welcome back into the Saturday Sports Countdown. Luke Robinson along with Scott Hardy at JR Sports Bar and Grill. Very short segment here, Scott. So just want to hit on a couple of things very quickly. First of all, Atlanta Braves, not very good.
Not at all. And I know you could tell it within the first 2 weeks of the season. Like, even though they were winning early on, after that first maybe couple weeks, the luster wore off and people realized that those trades that they made to get rid of their top-tier talent to kind of rebuild was definitely in that mode. So, again, if you're a Braves fan, it's been a tough season for you. But the NL East probably has the best team, I think, with the Cardinals. So we'll see.
Well, the Mets.
Yeah, and, okay, the Mets – they did it the correct way. Like, they built their team around pitching. Organically, correct. And, I mean, they have the best pitching staff, I think, maybe outside of the Nationals. But, I mean, Matt Harvey, DeGrom, who else? I can't even think now. Syndergaard, all those kids. I mean, they have the pitching staff that I think can rival what the Braves had in the 90s with their big 3 and 4. So it'll be fun to watch baseball going forward.
That's going to wrap up the baseball portion of the program because Luke is hosting, and I'm not going to talk a lot of baseball. I just brought up Atlanta because this is a quick segment. I also do want to mention this before we get into the SEC talk, which we'll do in the next segment. We have a little bit more time. Did you see any of the Miami Hurricanes last night?
I did not.
Okay. They end up winning the game, and they win convincingly in a sense, maybe 44-20. But that game was tight. It was 20-20 even at one time, I believe.
For the FIU?
Yeah. Or Florida Atlantic, yeah.
Florida.
And I'll tell you, I don't know what's going on with Al Golden. It's funny. I didn't realize this. Miami still has the most players in the NFL right now. Of any college team, Miami has the most players. Now, Alabama's, I think, second or third, and LSU's up there. USC is up there. Ohio State's up there. But, this is really – getting embarrassing for them. I mean, they've got to do more with what they have. There's too many resources. And I think college football's better when they're there because they are the ultimate villain. I mean, a lot of people don't like Saban, and I get it because he can be very off-putting, or people don't like Notre Dame because of historical purposes and because they seemingly get every advantage, or people don't like Urban Meyer. But those guys aren't the same kind of villain as the Miami program. The whole program was hated. But you hate them and you love them. They are kind of the Serena Williams, what I was talking about earlier, that you can embrace them, but if you embrace them, you're saying, okay, I want to be like them. I want to be cocky. I want to be flashy. And that's what they need to get back to. And I think college football is better when they're that way.
Well, I'll say this. I think what has happened is the type of players that Miami was recruiting while 15 years ago, maybe a program like in Ohio, I'm just going to use Ohio State, for example, but they may not have gone after that type of guy. Now, with the way things are now, people don't really care. That's not a big a deal anymore as what it used to be, kind of character issues. Now, I'm not going to say that you're just going to recruit a kid no matter what's going on with his personal life, but I think now the way college football is set up now, and I think the way that perception is now, and the political correctness of things, nobody really cares as much about the type of player and the things that you would hate about Miami 15 years ago. If you saw it on the field now, I think you'd be embraced a little bit more now than you would 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think back then it was, well, they're not really –
20 years ago.
Yeah, maybe 20 years ago. They're not really what college football is all about. Well, none of us are really what college football used to be about anymore. We've all kind of sold out. I mean, there's some aspects of just about every university. I mean, no offense, I'm all for Auburn building that giant scoreboard. I'm pro that. I get it. I know why they do it. But if you're a true academic and you're thinking college is all about books and study and et cetera, then you'll probably hate it. You're like, why are we spending X amount of $1 million on that when we need all these other programs are dying on the vine? But I get it. It's part of it. And I think more of us have embraced what Miami was. And now for Miami to be what they were, they're going to have to take it up a couple of more notches. They're going to have to go back to some Brian Bosworth type stuff. I mean, I know he played at Oklahoma, but they're going to have to get into that type of stuff. It feels like to even shock us anymore. Miami used to shock us. They don't shock us anymore. I mean, I still remember vividly being at my grandparents' cabin when they played Texas in that Cotton Bowl, and they just humiliated the Longhorns. And they were out there cabbage patching and bumping and grinding and doing everything they could after every first down. And you know what? When I was watching it, even though it disgusted my grandfather who played college football, I was sitting there thinking, they are kind of beating them up pretty good. I mean, I guess they can dance like that. I mean, because when you win that big and that impressively, I guess you can do it. And, of course, the NCAA has cut all that out. But I do think college football is better when teams like Miami are good. I don't like seeing Miami struggle with Florida Atlantic. I don't want to see Florida Atlantic be that good. I'm sorry if that offends anybody who likes the small college teams or whatever. I want Miami good. I like it when Notre Dame's good. I like it when USC's good, and Ohio State, and Alabama, and Penn State.
Texas, too.
Texas.
Really step it up, man. I feel bad for Charlie Strong. I mean,
do you feel bad for him, or do you think he's part of the problem? Let me tell you something. Charlie Strong, for all his rules and his you're going to do it my way and discipline, to drop kick your offensive coordinator and demote him after one bad game playing against a top 10 team, I think that sends a wrong message too, Scott.
Yeah, no, I agree with that definitely. But I think that this is what I was talking to my dad about. I said the problem Charlie Strong has is that when he tried to implement his way of doing things, but when that happens, you're stuck with a lot of freshmen and sophomore guys who haven't played. And so the talent drop off from what you had to what you now have is tremendous. And so they're going to continue to get drummed by Baylor and TCU and those teams. So it's going to be tough for them. And I think what Justin Mosley sent out something to us. They're number 7, I think, for recruiting in Texas. That's the craziest thing ever. So that lets you know where the program's falling to.
Dare I say it's ludicrous? You got me. You got me. I know this artist. All right, we're going to take a break here on the Saturday Sports Countdown. We'll be back in just a minute.
What do we have for him, Johnny?
Hey, Daniel, how long do you want this to be? Daniel.
I'll give you about how long you have. I'll give you 1 minute to go till you get off. Like that.
Welcome back to the Saturday Sports Countdown. Our producer, Daniel, back at the studio doing a fantastic job. But one thing he doesn't know is when you play the Black Crows so loud like that, I can't understand what he was saying. So I'm not sure when we're supposed to get out. I'm going to take a good guess at it, though. I know we got to get ready for the Auburn-Jacksonville State broadcast. Whew, you know what, Scott? You and I can get up here and talk for a couple hours, and we can fill time no matter what. A lot of things happening. We could talk college football all day, high school football all day. We didn't even get into pro football. We could mention the Braves, talk about Serena Williams losing. But if you're the Auburn broadcast team or the Alabama broadcast team, you got to fill 2 hours before Auburn or Alabama plays Jacksonville State. That can be tough stuff if you ask me.
Yeah, but I think at least from Auburn's perspective, they have a lot to talk about. There's some negatives that occurred in week one that will allow them to give some talking points at least. And I think it's the reverse on the Alabama side. I think you'll see a little more pump up there especially with Jacob Coker. I think that's what everybody was just wanting to see, how he was going to play, and he could drop a bomb next week against Ole Miss. But for week one, he earned the job, and so you have that. But I think on the Auburn perspective, just get out of there with no injuries.
Exactly.
Just get out of there with no injuries.
Really quickly, Texas A&M, is this Texas A&M 2014 where they opened with an impressive win against South Carolina and then the bottom falls out, or are you buying more A&M stock this year?
I'm buying it. I have them at 10-2. Actually, Auburn's only loss, I had them losing to Texas A&M. Now, maybe I have to redo that later on. But I think Texas A&M, I think Chavis was as impactful as Muschamp, maybe even a little bit more because they had no defense. I mean, they could outscore anybody, but I mean, Auburn's problem, they just weren't coached well enough, I think. So that's more correctable. But with Texas A&M, they had no defensive presence at all. But although they have the best player in the conference on the defensive side of the ball, and Myles Garrett, so I think that what he brings to the table, they should be able to make a nice little run this season.
Love the way A&M schedule sets up. I've been saying it all year in my predictions. I had A&M finishing second in the West behind Alabama, and frankly, I don't know that I shouldn't have Texas A&M finishing first. I'm gleaning a lot from one game, but they have a nice quarterback situation. Christian Kirk, the wide receiver, he looked incredibly dynamic. He a kid coming out of Arizona, a 5-star kid. And then you couple him with some of the other receivers they have that are absolutely tall and lanky and fast and can catch. And Auburn certainly remembers them from last year. This Texas A&M squad really impressed me. And then Arkansas, you just go down the list. Let's talk LSU, Mississippi State. You got a prediction there?
LSU 27, Mississippi State 17.
Okay, how about Oregon, Michigan State?
Michigan State 24, Oregon 20.
I'm with you. I think Michigan State gets it done. I'm having a hard time deciding who to pull for here because I'm not an Oregon fan.
I'm pulling for Michigan State because for the sake of Ohio State, they need them to win. The Big Ten needs them to win this game. I think this is probably the biggest game in the conference during the regular season. There's not a bigger game that anybody has non-conference-wise in the conference. So this could definitely add some credibility long-term going down the line.
How about Tennessee, Oklahoma today?
I like Oklahoma. I think the line was maybe it's a push. So I like Oklahoma in that game straight up.
And, I'm not one of those Alabama fans who just despises Tennessee. Alabama's beaten them so much lately that I'm kind of over anything I had for Tennessee, and they also had to deal with Philip Fulmer's failures right there at the end. So I'm sympathetic to him. I've been where Tennessee's been a little bit. So, but I don't think they can beat Oklahoma today. I want to pull for Tennessee because Bob Stoops will use this as a platform of, we can always beat the SEC. And
I didn't even think about that.
I don't know that I can deal with that, but I think Oklahoma's going to win this game.
Yeah, but I will say I had Tennessee going 9-3. This will be one of the 3 losses: Alabama, Oklahoma, and Georgia. So I think they do have a pretty good season.
If those are only 3 teams they lose to all year, that'd be a heck of a year. But Bowling Green put up 450 passing yards on them last week. I mean, that's going to be By the way, really quickly to close out the program, did you see the score from the Pennsylvania high school team last night?
I did not.
One team, Meadville, beat Dubois, however you say it, 107-90. One player had 750 yards rushing.
I'm not.
Is that what we want football to be? Is a great question.
Well, I think everything changes. I mean, you've seen the paradigm shift kind of in the offensive side, at least on what you want to do, especially in the state of Alabama. 15 years ago with the Lasmy days and Savarese days, saw a lot of wishbone and kind of slow paced on the offensive side. We'll go grinding out 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Now, I mean, you can't find a team in the state of Alabama that doesn't run some form of the spread or hurry up or something like that. So I just think it's changed, not to say that that's how that guy was getting the yards, but I mean, I just think there's been a change from a defensive philosophy or in kind of what people like to now more offense.
Well, there's a difference between you don't have a great defense. Take Auburn, for instance, last year. I mean, they might lose a game 55-44. There's a difference in that and 107-90.
Yeah.
I mean, 107-90, did anybody not score every time they touched it? I mean, there's something I don't like about that, but whatever. That's a debate for another day. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this early morning. Good luck to Auburn and Alabama today, and we will see you on Tuesday, everybody.